Do you ever feel like people don't listen to you? Have you ever been working in a group and you have a brilliant idea and you tell everyone and they just don't hear it? Then later, someone else has the exact same idea and suddenly the whole group is on board and we're all doing that same thing, even though I suggested it half an hour ago. This video is about how to understand social influence, who gets listened to, who gets ignored, and why. Hi everyone, Paul Micallef here from Autism from the Inside. I make weekly videos sharing the human side of autism, so make sure you hit subscribe to get the latest content. So when I was younger, especially in school, especially group projects in school, I used to get really frustrated and confused trying to figure out why some people get listened to and others just don't. Maybe we're deciding what game to play at lunchtime, or what movie to go and see, or what to do on the weekend. My first thought was that I just needed to pick an idea that the group liked, and if it was a good idea, then, well, the whole group would choose it, right? But that clearly wasn't the case. Very often, I noticed that there were one or two people who seemed to have a much greater influence over the group than everyone else. Even if there's no explicit reason for this, they don't have a special role within the group or anything, it's just that some people get listened to more than others. And of course, this was very frustrating because it felt like the whole group was always doing what these one or two people wanted to do, and I didn't really have much of a say in the situation. I just didn't understand why my good ideas were being ignored and why these other people were being followed just because they're more popular. It turns out it all comes down to a relatively complex social phenomenon which we can refer to as social influence. This is a type of social capital which I introduced in a previous video, and it's essentially exactly what it sounds. Every person has a different ability to influence a group. Some people have greater influence and some people have less influence. These days, it's common to talk about social media influencers. Well, what do? They're essentially just popular. People listen to them. They've got lots of attention. And by virtue of that fact, they have a much greater social influence than most people. Have you ever started a trend where you've been the first person to do something that no one else is doing, and then slowly people start following you and eventually everyone wants to do it? I know that has not been my experience. I've typically had the opposite experience where I go and do something and then no one else follows. Like maybe being in primary school and going to sit at a table by myself or play with a specific toy by myself and no one else joins me. The opposite of social influence is social ostracism. Having a lot of social influence means people are looking at you, looking towards you, giving you attention. Ostracism is the opposite. People are avoiding you, averting their eyes, not looking at you, trying not to give you any attention. And these two concepts have helped me a lot in figuring out how much influence I'm likely to have in any given situation. If I'm being socially ostracized in a group, then if I put up my hand and get everyone's attention and try and say something, probably instead of actually listening to what I have to say, most people are going to be thinking, I really wish he'd stop talking, how embarrassing, can he please stop talking now? And although having this understanding doesn't actually change the situation immediately, it does mean that I'm less surprised and less frustrated when a really brilliant idea that I have doesn't get received by others. I thought I'd give you an example of this using a little Rubik's Cube. So this is one of my favorite designs. It's very simple. It's actually only 6 moves to get this from a completed cube. And imagine we are a group trying to collectively solve this Rubik's Cube, trying to figure out what are the moves that are going to get it back to being solved. And I put up my hand and say, I've got it, guys. Look, it's pretty simple. Look, see, there's a stripe here and a stripe on the other side too. So we just need to turn the right-hand side this way and the left-hand side the other way, and then the middle twice, and then basically put the right and left back, and then we're done. It is very likely that most people will not follow a solution like that, even if it's correct. So in an objective sense, you've got some guy with no social influence putting up his hand and suggesting a solution that no one else understands. Is it any wonder that a lot of the time my ideas are not actioned by a group? Now, just like I was talking about in my video on social capital, it really depends on the situation. So let's say we're in the exact same group and I'm known as the guy who is most likely to be able to solve a Rubik's Cube. In a situation where my reputation is that I'm the most likely person in that group to know how to solve a Rubik's Cube, then maybe I would have more social influence in that situation and they would try my suggestion. And for those who want to see, it is fairly straightforward. One, middle twice, and then back to there. There we go, right? So even if my suggestion or solution is objectively the best thing to do in that situation and really does solve the problem, if the group can't see where I'm going with that, they're unlikely to be able to follow. And this goes back to something I was saying in the Autistic People Are Not Leaders video I did a little while back. If I am known for doing something that other people are likely to copy, that's very different to being known for commonly going off and doing my own thing when no one follows me. And this is the crux of what it means to have social influence. Am I known for being followed, or am I known for going off and doing my own thing? If I'm known for doing my own thing that is different to everyone else, then it's not socially safe to follow me. Because if you do follow me, you're going to be in the minority where everyone else is over here doing the group norm thing, and you've decided to do what I'm doing, which means it's just the two of us and you're not really part of the group anymore. On the other hand, a trendsetter is someone who is really in touch with what is going on in the group. It reminds me of a saying, how to be a good leader: figure out what everyone wants to do and order them to do it. A trendsetter has a demonstrated ability to do new things that other people are actually going to want to do as well. And if that's my reputation, then when I do a new thing, it's safe for other people to follow because they know that a lot of others are going to follow as well. And this concept of social safety, social conformity, making sure that you're still part of the group is a really powerful influence. There's a famous experiment called the smoky room experiment. Essentially, people were asked to do a task like filling out a survey or something in a room that was slowly filling with smoke. Now, clearly that's quite concerning. And so it's no surprise that the people who were by themselves in the room quickly raised the alarm and said, hey guys, there's a vent over here and there's smoke pouring out of it. Like, what's going on? But the really interesting thing is that when there are social dynamics at play, when there was more than one person in the room, my response to the smoke is going to be heavily influenced by the reactions of the other people I'm in the room with. The most significant example is when the others in the room were actually paid actors deliberately ignoring the smoke. It's very hard to take a problem seriously if everyone else in the room thinks it's okay. For better or worse, most people, when they're considering how to respond in a situation, the very, very first unconscious thing they'll do in that first split second is look around the room and say, what is everyone else doing? And it's in that moment of hesitation where social influence is most powerful. The weird kid just made a suggestion. Am I safe to say, yes, that's a good idea? Or if I say that, will everyone else shout me down and I'll be the odd one out? Having a low amount of social capital in a situation, being the odd one out at the start, having a low amount of social influence, or even being actively ostracized, sets us up with a huge disadvantage even before we open our mouths. So in practice, if I want to get around this, there are two main strategies that come to mind. The first one is to have indirect influence. And what that looks like is I've got a really good idea and I'm going to say that really good idea and know that most people are going to ignore me, but at least it's in the collective consciousness so that when I'm nudge in that direction later, or when someone else is trying to come up with a solution themselves, they will have already thought of that idea. So ironically, once it's disassociated with me and someone else comes up with the idea, then we can finally pick it up and move forward. There's a real art to just proposing an idea, leaving an idea, and then just letting it sit without pushing it and just acknowledging that people will come around to it eventually. And if they don't eventually come around to it, then it probably wasn't as good an idea as I thought it was. The second obvious strategy is to deliberately increase my social influence. And most of the time, that looks like building a reputation. If I had a good idea last time, people are going to remember that and assume I'll probably have a good idea this time. Reputation works both ways. If I was talking a lot last time and didn't really have much to say, then as soon as I open my mouth, people are going to think, oh, he talks a lot and he doesn't have a lot to say. Whereas if I instead insert any adjective or quality here, maybe I'm always respectful, or maybe I listen well, or maybe whatever all those things are, if I've done that consistently in the past, then people are going to treat me as if that's what I'm doing right now. Another good way of building social influence, which is kind of related to reputation, is having a reputation for being really good at a specific thing. I remember in my engineering office, there were a couple of guys that we would always go to if we had a question about a specific thing. Why? Because they had a reputation for being able to help with that problem. So even if normally I'm not the one who's typically listened to in a group, if I'm the go-to guy who knows about the thing that we're talking about, then in that area, I will have a lot greater influence than I would have otherwise. But ultimately, it's all about social safety. What's the rest of the group doing? What's the rest of the group likely to do? And if I'm asking someone to go against that, go against the grain, stand out, put their hand up, stick their neck out, it's going to feel unsafe for them. On the other hand, if I'm asking someone to go with the flow, there's already this movement, all you need to do is jump on board, that's much easier and much safer. And the more perceived social influence I have in a particular situation, the more likely people are going to listen to me and think that I actually know what I'm talking about. Anyway, I might leave it there for today. This concept of social influence has been extremely helpful for me understanding situations, so I hope you've found it valuable as well. Please leave a comment if you can. I'd love to hear what you think. And if you're interested to hear more about emotional intelligence, you might like to check out my online EQ 101 course. It's 12 modules going through self-awareness, emotional regulation, social awareness, and relationship management. So all that and more on the Autism from the Inside website. Make sure you check it out. So thanks again for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you again next week. Bye.